Hello, everybody, and welcome to day 2 of this wonderful live online masterclass on how to create limitless health for your dogs. So we've got a fantastic agenda on for today, and I'll briefly run through what that includes. We're going to cover the whole terrain model versus germ theory, which is the grounding that this whole diet and health system is based around. So I will just briefly touch on that with you today. I'm then going to finish off the challenge from yesterday. We've got steps 6 and 7 to do with that, which includes feeding your dog, actually taking the steps to start feeding. You've got all the tools now, and hopefully you've got the food, you know how to prepare it, and now it's actually feeding day. So we'll talk about that. And then we go on to celebrate the fact that you've started this journey and where to go from here. We're then going to talk about alternative foods and what alternative foods you can use to yours and your dog's benefit. We'll talk about a sick pet strategy. Welcome. welcome. Lovely to have you here. So we'll talk about a sick pet strategy. And then we'll talk about how you can rotate the food days and your feeding routine for optimal health for your pet. We'll then and how to rotate the food feeding with fasting and bringing in the alternative foods for the optimum way of life for your pet. We'll talk briefly on detox symptoms and transitioning your pets onto the diet and what you need to be aware of when you're going through that process. And then if we've got time, I will talk about the other. We've basically covered in this challenge, 7-day challenge, one step in my 9-step holistic process. So that takes in the whole of your, all the functionings of your dog, including exercise, fresh air, and energy, working with energy. So we're going to, I'll briefly go on to the other steps that are intricate to the whole system. So moving on, let's get on with the agenda, as there's lots to go. So let's talk about the terrain model versus germ theory, which is the whole natural hygienic grounding, and basically they refute the whole medical system's idea that germs and bacteria are what cause disease. Their theory is that the germs and bacteria are there to do a job, and that ultimately the terrain, which is the inner terrain, is what causes the disease. So if the inner terrain isn't clean, then basically it will create problems through. It will create problems within the whole organism. So organs will start to function incorrectly. As it slowly gets clogged up, and the main clogging up, humans as well as obviously animals, the main clogging up is obviously what's put into the body, which is obviously most of the time is food. So and the natural foods for any particular species would pass through naturally. The body would have the relevant enzymes and system in place to move the correct food. The correct food would actually enhance its functioning, as opposed to restrict. It's, you know, like when you've had a big meal, you fall asleep on the sofa because your system is tired, it's busy working on digesting the food. So and the system has to work much harder if the food going in isn't actually the optimal food designed for that particular species. So so that's the whole grounding of how this theory is, how this system actually works so well, because all we do is turn around the whole medical industry's theory, and if you want to know more and want to study more, there are books and people, but you know, there was Pasteur obviously came up with the germ theory, and at the same time there was a guy called Beauchamp who actually was arguing, and apparently on his deathbed he actually refuted his whole theory, Pasteur, refuted, you know, changed his mind about the whole theory. So there's plenty of history, and if you're interested, I can certainly give you the resources and the tools to investigate that more, or obviously a Google search will probably give you as much, if not more, than me. But yeah, if you Google germ theory versus terrain model versus germ theory, there's books and all sorts of resources to look into that more. So from our perspective, that's the theory is that if we're feeding kibbles in particular, and obviously other not optimal food, cooked food, most of the time any packet food or tin food is being processed in one form or another, and no doubt all sorts of additives in there to make it have a long shelf life, then that is not optimal for your dog's body. Your dog's body was genetically created to process meat, raw meat. You know, that they're out there. I'm guessing that dogs and wolves came on this planet to be cleanup machines and to control the wildlife, and like you say, as wildlife died off, you know, dogs would, you know, and wolves would be the ones that would clean up those bodies. So so they haven't, you know, their bodies are 99.9999999% wolf, and like I say, their bodies have been designed to eat and process raw meat, and obviously the other foods that they are able to process, like the fruits and berries, yeah, they eat grass, you know, just whatever they find to eat in the wild that's palatable, and their bodies will naturally process, whereas the foods that we create for them haven't been designed. And I guess you only have to look at the sick pet industry as much as you do the sick human industry, situation, to know that, you know, none of us are thriving, and something's gone wrong somewhere. So that's, I guess, you know, how this, and then like I say, it's then when you actually put the correct eating system into place, then you just stand back and watch the result, and you know, then you don't need to worry about any theories, because it's actually right before your eyes, and you can see that the animals thrive with their bodies being fed what they were designed to feed. So okay, so that explains it. So basically, disease is caused by a dirty terrain, inner terrain, and so health comes from cleaning that terrain, or the body actually cleans itself. The food just, the lighter foods, or feeding the correct foods, just allows the body to perform in the way it was designed to perform. Whereas when it's been fed the wrong foods don't move through as efficiently as the body obviously was designed to have food moving through, and then you know, it just gets clogged up, and that then creates an environment for worms and parasites and bacteria and things to then thrive inside the terrain. And then it's obviously just that then is, you know, that then the body just can't function correctly. The organs start to fail, you know, you get gunk. The body does its best. I mean, it, you know, if the dog's itching, it's generally a sign that, yeah, the skin is the waste, the built up waste is actually trying to get out any way it can. The body is trying to get what it isn't meant to be in it out, and if it can't get it out through the natural systems of urine, urine and poops obviously are the main ones. If it can't get the waste out with those, then it will try any which way it can, which is ears. It's why you get gunky ears, eyes running, and then, like I say, the skin is like the third biggest organ. No, it is the biggest organ, and so eliminative organ. And so, of course, that is a major one. And so, you know, you permanently see dogs itching, and as a rule, you permanently see dogs itching, and that is just the body trying to get rid of the waste. And what I haven't talked about, sorry, I'm going to have a sip of water. What I haven't talked about is the situation that, on top of obviously the wrong foods that we often feed our pets, is the other chemicals in the way of vaccinations, antibiotics. I'm trying to think of anything, flea products that, you know, are recommended on a regular basis, worming treatments, you name it, and anything that the medical industry has produced to clearly make money. Like I say, my dogs haven't had any of that for the last 6 years, and all they've done is get better and better and better of health. Whereas the first couple of years, all I did was listen to what the vets were recommending to me, and did what they told me to, and just slowly but surely their health just deteriorated and deteriorated and deteriorated. So yeah, so the other any chemicals, like I say, in the form of vaccinations, worming and parasite control, once you get that diet right, of course you now understand how it all works. Once you get that diet right, then those type of things, they're there to, those germs and bacteria, parasites are there to do a job, and once the system's clean, then you just won't see them. I used to buy it, I always went the natural route as well. I started off with all the typical flea products, but when I realized that they were saying do not get the products on your skin, I was thinking, well, no wonder my dogs wince and cringe every time I come with the pipettes to put them in my cats. Every time I come and put these pipettes on them, they were, you know, they were not, you know, if I've got food in my hand, there was one reaction, but on a monthly basis, when these flea treatments, and all it was, as far as I was concerned, was liquid going on the back of their necks, they would just cringe and go into corners. They did not want them. And I can groom those dogs every day, and they're like, yippee, 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 she's giving us a brush. And, you know, and even washing them, they don't relish me putting them in the shower tray and washing them, but they're not hiding in the corner. So anyway, so I had a sort of sixth sense that that those weren't right. So I then ended up going the natural route. Hold on a second. Mark, okay, hopefully that's sorry about that. Hopefully that's that Mark will sort that out, that will sort Joey out from here. So going back to the flea treatments and things, those chemicals, yeah, are not designed. I did then go down the natural route before I learned this whole model of feeding, and yeah, I used natural shampoos and things successfully. There were some products that I, successfully had, I never saw fleas. But then, like I say, did I ever see fleas before? I might have seen one or two, but I certainly didn't see the mass of them that, that they see these big posters up in the vets with these scary things and read about them multiplying by the billions. So I think I'd seen my dog scratching, but was that actually fleas? Who knows? Anyway, all I can say is that in the last 6 years, we haven't used any flea shampoos. We haven't used any products whatsoever. And my two have got gleaming coats and they don't itch at all. That's not to say I have never seen a flea on them, because we're outside. They're outside. These dogs are, they have 2 hours walk in the mornings, and they're running everywhere, in long grasses, in woods, everywhere. And ticks. We'll talk about ticks as well. And so, have I ever seen fleas on them? Yes, I have. I don't necessarily think it's actually been dog fleas. I think it's actually been more that they found dead animals, or they've gone in burrows where they've found like a nest of baby rabbits that have been born somewhere or something, and they're actually trying to get into their burrow, or they've found a fox's hole or something. There's definitely been times where I've definitely seen a flea on them, but it's a flea. And will I take precautions when I see that? Do I do different things in the summer months? Yes, I do. So I basically keep all of my furniture covered where the dogs sleep. And the same with my bed. They sleep with me in the bed. It's not healthy. I wouldn't recommend it, and I would never do it again, but they do. So I basically cover my bed, and that in the summer months, the bed cover is changed twice a week. I wash that in a on a hot wash, and I change that once, sometimes twice a week. And then on the furniture where they sleep during the day, I wash all of that every week without fail. I will comb them. I wouldn't say I do it every day. I mean to do it every day, to comb them, because the theory is that fleas and parasites like that do not like being disturbed. If they want to, have nests and things, then they just want, they don't want a comb going through there once a day or twice a day. So we used to have a routine when I first got into this, and again, it's been a slow progression where I've slowly got more and more confident, because year in and year out, I've slowly done a little bit less and a little bit less. But in the early years, I was very nervous because I stopped, washing them regularly with these special shampoos, be it they were natural. And I trusted and just used the comb. And then, like I say, was very regimented around the home, because, like I say, I'd been educated that these fleas, if you get one, they multiply like billions at a time. So do I still do that? Yes, I do, because I have heard that if these things do take root, then they will take root. And it's not to say that I have never seen these fleas. So the fleas I see are generally much larger than what they call dog fleas, and certainly my experience with cat fleas as well. The cat fleas, like, literally you see it and it's gone. It is like at the speed of light, whereas these things are more like a quarter of an inch big, and they're more like wiggle. And I googled it, and I think they're either rabbit fleas or fox fleas or badger fleas. So they're a different type of flea to a dog flea, apparently. So these things I have seen on them, and I have always associated, when I've seen them, I thought, oh yeah, they disappeared off into that wood, for a couple of minutes. I wonder if they had their head down a burrow or something, and hence they've come, or did they find a dead animal, which, again, if the animal's got fleas on it, then they sometimes will jump on. But I literally have generally spotted it, and I've picked it. I've probably, pick it off them, and then squeeze it with my nails, and that's dead. And then I will probably be conscious. I'll make sure I comb them for a few days. But this year, and when I first started, I used to wash them twice. They would be washed, literally shampooed from head to toe every single week. I gave up the expensive shampoos, natural shampoos, and would just use human, plant-based, as natural a product as I could get hold of. But I would froth them up, shampoo from literally from the neck down, and let that, you know, and then wash that off, because again, in theory, these fleas don't like the water. So that's my routine. I'm trying to think what got me onto the whole parasite thing. But yeah, so my experience is, as a whole, we haven't needed, and we've certainly not had any worm treatments. And I used to do worm counts, and Joey definitely had worms at various points. But again, I learned that those worms would only be there when there was enough gunk inside for them to eat and feast on. And as soon as you clean the inner terrain out, then the worms aren't interested in living there anymore, and they will exit, which they do. So yeah, so you do not need, once you know how, you just get more and more confident as you go along. So I spent a lot of time on that. But yeah, parasites are only there to do a job. And so if there's a lot of gunk, if the body is getting rid of waste that will be yeasty, then there's a possibility that that would attract parasites to help clean up the job. So I'm not arguing that they aren't there and that they don't exist. I question actually as to how big an extent, like the vets and things would make you think that if you didn't give them their treatment, that you would be inundated. So that's my question, based on my experience since changing their diet. So yeah, so that's that. So now you understand the whole, it's a change of thinking on, instead of, oh, I've got this pain in my arm, quick, go to the doctor, get a tablet to make that better. All we think about is, oh, hang on a second, where am I internally? I'm talking about humans now. What's going on internally that's causing that pain in that hand? And I won't go into that because it is a whole, that's a whole nother subject, is talking about how a disease manifests in the body, and what's created that, and we're not going to go there today. So that just gives you an idea, a brief explanation of the terrain model versus the germ theory. And yeah, so we're now going to move on to the last couple of steps on the 7-day challenge that we had started yesterday, and that you've got the workbooks for. And we've basically got to the stage where we're about to feed our dog. So we know we now know what food to feed our dog, or the meat. This section is really the challenge is just the meat section, the meat feeding section, which in all honesty you can get away with. As long as you fast your dog on a regular basis, you could get away with just feeding meat if that's what you want to do. But I'm going to go into this a bit later today. But yeah, there's ways that you can play around with the diet that it just gives you more strings to your bow, more options, and the different foods will have a different response in the dog's body, so you can use it to your advantage. And I'll explain that more when we get to that stage. So we've bought the right, so we know what food to feed our dog from a meat point of view. We've bought our meat, and we've now prepared our meat. So we now know all of those steps. And then the next step is to actually prepare your dog for the transition to a raw meat diet. And that, I would suggest, we talked about this on the last talk, that is basically, if you're going from kibble or any processed food. I would just give your dog a chance on more hydrating foods. Maybe, you know, maybe, yeah, I would go on to sort of fruits and plant foods for maybe 2 to 4 weeks, just to rehydrate the body gently. And then I would go into a fast. Then I would encourage a fast if you're and certainly if you want to join me, I can handhold you through the whole fast process. And yeah, and then I would recommend a fast, which would allow for any food to, you know, any leftover foods to exit the body. And it would also give your dog's body a real opportunity to have some rest. Which, trust me, for that, you know, it will love every moment of that, and it will reward you like you can't imagine for that rest. And yeah, and then I would introduce meat. So if 24 hours would be my absolute minimum of a fast, because they actually, you know, some people actually feed once a day, so that's not really fasting. You would want to miss that one meal a day and then go till the next one. So that would give the body, you know, a full 24-hour fast, because it won't have had the meal that it would normally have each day, and that, so it would technically have 48 hours of rest from when you last fed the meal. So that would be, obviously, depending on how sick your pet is, you know, you might need much longer if you actually are talking about reversing disease. But if we're just talking about transitioning to a new diet, then that basically would allow your dog's body enough rest to heal anything that is going on, whether it's healthy or not. It will just allow the body to optimize itself. And then you can add the new food, and it will be this meat meal. And yeah, so, and that's basically it. So we've got it prepared. And we would just, obviously, again, in an ideal world, if we've got a garden, we would take our dog out there and feed it there. It's just a lot easier. In the summer, I usually use a bowl of water and just rinse where they've eaten. Even not if it's a tarmac area or patio, I would always rinse it off. But if it's grass, it's fine. But in the summer, you can get, obviously, if they've left any bones or anything, then, you know, you can get, or feathers in my case, or fluff. It can attract flies. So I generally just wash it down. And if you're doing it in the home, then again, you'll obviously, you know how to keep that clean. So so that's that. And that's something I did want to say. So if you are feeding indoors, then, you know, it's, in an ideal world, you'll have a wood solid floor and you can just wash it clean. But I have fed both my dogs on towels where I've had carpeted houses before, and I just put as big a towel as I can down, and they will, you know, Sky will actually eat on the towel. Joey won't. I'm chasing him around the house with the towel. So I rarely feed them indoors. You know, I can even make them eat in the rain sometimes, but if it's light, rather than actually let them eat in my house, because Joey will just go anywhere to eat his. So anyway, so that's that. Okay, so it's feed day, and then basically you just feed your dog. The calculations for them, they're in the workbook. But basically, if you've got a 15-kilo dog, I'm going to use my dogs as examples, they're 15 kilos. I would basically, so they would be talking about feed anything between, usually the round figure is about 3%. I usually base their food on 3%. If I'm honest, they generally eat a bit more than that. They have a lot of exercise. That was something I was saying to you. They have a couple of hours in the morning, and then usually a couple of hours in the afternoon. That's varied as they've got a bit older and I've got a bit more relaxed. They still get a couple of hours in the morning, and then usually at sort of anything up to an hour at lunchtime, and then anything up to an hour before tea, like before their meal at 5 o'clock. So that's and they get plenty, and they're allowed off lead. We're just surrounded by arable fields, and they have freedom to run. So they're very, very lucky dogs, and I've actually changed my whole life since they came along, to always make sure they get as near to a dog life as I could possibly give them. Okay, So we basically feed our dogs. If this is the first meal that your dog, it will depend on how old he or she is, as to whether they actually know what raw meat is and whether it's actually for eating. So what I would suggest for that very, very first time, buy a variety of different types of meat to feed them. So I would buy a portion, a relatively small portion of mincemeat, just mincemeat. If you're going to the butcher and they're prepared to mince up some meat and bone, they're unlikely to be keen, because the bone will blunt the blade on their machines that mince up the food. But you may find, I found butchers that had old blades that they were prepared to mince up bone. This is very, very early stages, when they were very young and I didn't know what I know now. But yeah, and so my advice would be to let them, and bearing in mind that if you've done this fast, they'll actually be quite hungry. They'll be ready for a meal. It's not like that you go from feeding your regular routine. They will have gone lighter with the couple of weeks of obviously plant foods and fruit, and lighter foods, which we'll talk about the alternative foods. But they will have had a couple of weeks on lighter, more hydrating foods, but they are lighter than certainly dog foods and kibbles and definitely raw meat. So they will have had a few weeks, hopefully, anything up to a month of those type of foods. So they'll actually be ready for something more significant. So which definitely will help with them being more prepared to try something different, the texture. And so my advice would be to just test them with a little bit of mincemeat, so that they actually get a taste in their mouth, and that they get the feel for the raw sensation of the raw meat. And then if they willingly have that, then I would move on, and obviously I wouldn't give them anything more than a mouthful or a handful at the most. And then I would move on to give them a bone. And depending on the size of your dog, if you've actually bought a whole chicken and cut it into, I would cut a whole chicken into 4 pieces, or get the butcher to. And you can actually cut chickens with scissors, with normal kitchen scissors. And I can help you with tools if you want the right tools for cutting up these things. I've trialed and errored plenty of tools, scissors and bone cutters and things, so I can help you with those going forward if you ever need any for further details on those. But just email me. But yeah, so you would just cut the chicken. If you're feeding a whole chicken rather than the legs, cut the chicken into 4 pieces, and then I would just hand that to you. Once the dog's willingly taken the mince, then I would just hand the piece of chicken, and the chicken carcass is going to be easier to eat than actually the leg. And that's because the rib cage is very plasticky. So so I would feed that first. It's softer and it will be easier, and your dog will explore it, and then he will no doubt eat it. And then you're on. That's it. You won't even need the mince. You can use that for your own consumption if you eat meat. And then just feed the portion sizes. Once he's eaten one part of that, depending on how much you've measured out, and that's what I was about to tell you, wasn't it? Was the actual portion sizes. So I've got 15 kilogram dogs, and to work out the percentages, so 15 kilos, 1% would be 150 grams. Okay, so 15 kilos, 1% would be 150 grams. And then if I wanted to feed my dogs 3%, which is the measurement, and in your booklet it's got the different, I've actually outlined the various foods and the percentages what to feed. And like I say, 3% seems to be the figure that most people use, and then you tend to monitor whether they do well on that amount or whether they need a bit more. And when you get to my stage, you don't even measure it anymore. You just feed them, and you watch you watch them, I can very quickly tell if I've fed them lighter, I will notice the next day, literally within a couple of days, when I'm putting the harnesses around, that oh gosh, you've lost some weight. So I then know maybe to increase a little bit more of the food the next time I feed them. But in the beginning, go with the percentages. It's easier, and then you know as well exactly what you're feeding. So, and keep a record even, so yeah. So the 15 kilo with 3%, you would take the 150 grams and multiply that by 3. So I would be feeding about 450 grams for a 15 kilogram spaniel. And obviously, if you're talking about a 30 kilogram dog, then you would be talking double that. Okay, so 450, you'd be talking more like 900 grams, which is just under 1 kilo. So yeah, and if you want any more help on that, you can email me. Okay, so yeah, so that's it. And then you fed your dog his first bone and his first portion of chicken, and then, like I say, if he masters that, and you can then, I would then give him the leg, and he, like I say, the leg just gives them, it's a little bit more substantial, and they just enjoy the fun of chewing on that bone, a little bit more of bone, and yeah, and you'll obviously be able to watch them enjoy that. And that's it. And other than that, I'd just say just supervise and watch for them. I've definitely had experiences and they sort it out themselves, but it definitely can be scary when you're watching. They will, you know, they do get bones stuck going down, but they know, and their body produces the acids and the fluids to clear it. Yeah, and it's just us, obviously, that gets nervous. I have had weird experiences with Joey, and like I say, he's a real gulper, and will, honestly, I look and he's eating bone and pieces, shards of pieces, and I think, oh God, he shouldn't be eating that. But you know, you can't tell a dog how to eat its bones. And he will swallow those. And I, like I say, I've had a couple of, and this was very in the beginning, definitely in the beginning. And I had a couple of experiences where it was like he must have gulped in air. And it was like he was inflating like a balloon. Really scary to watch. And don't let this put you off, because in Sky it never ever happened, and anybody else I've ever spoken to never ever happened. So it could just be how Joey just, you know, was gulping at the time. And like I say, and that was very early on in the feeding the raw, you know, the whole raw foods. But he blew up. He was literally like and blowing up. And I went to give him, because I've done a dog first aid course, I went to give him the Heimlich maneuver, thinking he'd got something stuck, and it made no difference. And so I opened the door. At that point, he was actually indoors, but he wanted to go outside. I was worried. The first time I was very worried, but I allowed him to go out, and guess what? He went straight out and ate grass. So just always, that's another tip definitely that I wanted to share with you guys, is always keep a section of your garden with longer grass. Obviously in the summer we mow them every week, and I've always asked my gardeners, or wherever I've lived, I've always made sure that they've got access to grass, whether it be for if their tummies do feel, you know, queasy because you've missed a meal, or like I say, this instance with this, where he was blowing up like a balloon and my Heimlich maneuver had not done anything. He went straight out and was eating grass. I was like, oh my God, but I knew in that situation that was not a vet. I mean, by the time it would have taken me to get him there, there was no way. So I just had to, you know, put my life in the hands of the gods and hope that he knew what he was doing. And that's what I did. He went out, ate grass, and then the next thing he had sorted it out and he was fine. And like I say, that happened on one other occasion, and the same thing. I thought, you know, for me, it was awful to watch. But he, like I say, but because of my experience with the first one, he just went out. I knew, just let him go and eat grass. And that's what I would say in your situation. They ever get, you know, if they're ever going, you know, croaking because they've obviously got a bit of bone stuck in their throat, they know how to clear it. And like I say, just keep that an element of grass. They don't like it really, really long. They obviously love the spring grass, but always just leave a patch of your garden with some access to lengthy grass, but not ridiculously lengthy, because they like it like up to a sort of probably about that sort of length, and then when it gets longer than that, they're not so keen. So my gardener would always have like little patches. So once it got really long, he would cut that, and then he'd be developing another another patch elsewhere. So these are just tips that are so valuable, that if someone had been holding my hand as I'd, you know, all I had was a book, and I'd email if I really, really was desperate, I could email Nora, but yeah, that wasn't what she wanted to do. She wanted, you know, she just was, yeah, promoting her book. So so yeah, she was busy. She runs a dog walking business, so that was her thing. So she wasn't there to answer my questions or my concerns or help me in any way. And if there was one thing that I really could have benefited, and that's why I'm here offering this to you. I've 6 years doing it with my dogs. If it hasn't happened to me, then I've probably helped someone that, you know, will have been going through whatever you go through. So yeah, so that's that. Okay, so we've now fed our dog, and all I can say is, yay, you're on the way to phenomenal health beyond what you can even imagine right now. If your dog itches, you know there's something wrong. So that's how, you know, how your life just completely changes. And that's the other thing. I've read other people comment, you know, these gurus and things have often got wealthy entrepreneurs and things have often got pets on the videos that I watch, and they make little comments that they worry more about their dog than they ever did their children. And the reason being, and I totally understand, is because a dog can't tell you, you know, a dog can't tell you what's wrong with it. So I can honestly say, apart from obviously probably the first 6 months where you're learning, it's new, so everything's new, and your dog's health is slowly improving. Once you get to 6 months, well, even 3 months, there's no turning back, because your dog just looks like a different dog. The coat just has changed so much, and the energy level has changed so much that, yeah, there's no going back. And like I say, I think I probably mentioned this yesterday, but I didn't pursue. Joey was always historically really skinny, and Sky was always edging on the slightly fatter side. She's a different build altogether, and it was her and her tummy problems that have made me so, you know, I didn't really consider Joey's. They were big problems in the making, but at that time they didn't bother me enough. Sky waking me up every night in the middle of the night with tummy aches was enough for me to need something and do something urgently, whereas Joey's were just like constant itching, scooting on the carpets and stuff, reverse sneezing. They were all annoying, or not even annoying. I just assumed they were normal, if I'm honest, at that point. The other big thing, once they feed healthy and very interesting, is they do not snore. If you've got a dog that snores, for sure it's because it's actually being fed too much food, and probably the wrong food doesn't help either. But I know if I've fed mine too much, if I've given them a bit too much food, they will snore in the night times, you know, and then I know the next day I don't feed them as much. So things that we take, you know, we consider, you know, people laugh about, you know, I can sleep with my dog that snores, but I can't sleep with my husband that snores, and you know, and it's kind of a cute thing, but it's not health. The snoring isn't natural. The snoring is actually something that's going wrong internally, and it's a little sign for you. And that's, you know, again, it's experience that I've learned over the time. I've thought, oh, Sky doesn't snore anymore, whereas when, you know, as a youngster she was always a snorer. But sometimes if I overfeed Joey, he will be snoring in the night. And it's like, I've obviously fed too much today. So anyway, some little tips that I can share with you today, just so you know, like these little things, they aren't the cute little thing like scooting. I mean, it's gross. We used to cringe. I used to find it quite funny, but it actually wasn't in Joey's best interest. Okay, so I think that's it. We're celebrating now. We've taken our first few footsteps on the road to a new life for you. And that was what I was highlighting there, is that since like I say, the first, well, there you go, I rush and divert. The first 3 months, I actually bailed on Joey of changing this diet, but I was strict with Sky because, like I say, it was a bigger problem in my life than Joey's. And because he got quite thin with me fasting. So at that point, the routine that I decided to take on was I would feed the meat today, for example, and then I would move straight into a 48-hour fast. So they would have a big meal, and I mean, I would allow them, and often I would actually break it into 2 days, no, into 2 portions, because that it would, it definitely, they were having so much exercise that to feed enough for effectively 3 days, because you're feeding them today, like tonight, and then you wouldn't be feeding them tomorrow at all, and then you'd feed them the night of the next day. And that was my routine. And Sky could handle it because she was overweight, but Joey was already lean. He wasn't slim, like he is now, but he was lean. And in my mind, if you were comparing him to other people's dogs, he was too thin. So I was always constantly trying to get more food in him. And so when I changed over, I very quickly saw Joey, disappearing in front of me because of the sort of his body needed to get. That's what we'll talk about, detox, but no. So long story short, the whole point of this particular part of the talk is that I went for 3 months strict with Sky, but I was feeding Joey in between. And so Sky was strictly on this one meat meal, well, no, 1 meat day, then a gap, then a whole day off, and then she would get a meat meal the next day. So she was alternate, really. Yeah, you could say it was alternate day feeding. So she would have a meal today, meat meal, and then she would have whole of tomorrow off, and then we'd be back on to meat. But because of the portions, because I was having to feed bigger portions, because of the exercise and the lifestyle that Joey and Sky had, I was actually breaking that into 2 meals. So she effectively, my partner used to say, are they on a meat day today? Or are they on a fasting day? So he would, you could see the difference in the 2 dogs, because on a meat day, they were completely upside down, sleeping all day. On a fasting day, they were actually more, they were up and awake, and they were sniffing, and they'd want to go outside, and it wasn't that they weren't relaxed, but they had more energy. Sometimes you could tell they were on a sort of healing time, and they would be tired on a fasting day, but not quite like a meat day. It's a lovely day. So yeah, and then after 3 months of doing that consistently, I had a groomer at that point. I've since learned to do all my own grooming, but at that point I had a groomer came round, and she commented about what's happened with Sky, because not only had Sky lost a little bit of weight, which had been excess weight, but her coat had completely changed. And then standing the 2 dogs together, because I wasn't doing it with Joey in the way that I was with Sky. Standing the 2 together, you could see, and that was my no-brainer. From there on, I knew I had to become, a lot more stricter and focused with Joey as well, because I wasn't being fair to him, and it was actually my weakness that was kept, feeding him. I couldn't bear to see him lose that much weight, whereas actually some people and some dogs, when you go through the detox process, you effectively take off all the old food has built that body, and then changing the food and the lifestyle, you have to allow, a bit like when you do, you're renovating a house, you generally have to take down the old part of the house and then rebuild. And that's what you have to do on this food, or that's what the body's doing. With Sky, her system just didn't show it the way that Joey's. He ended up going really, 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 really skinny, to the point where people were, in the UK we have the RSPCA, and people were actually threatening to report me to the RSPCA. Luckily, more often than not, they'd then see Sky come along, because they thought I was obviously mistreating Joey and not feeding him. But then Sky would come along looking like perfect health. He was just going through this skinny stage, which it is a skinny stage. Some humans, when they're going through detox, go really, really skinny. I never did. I just, I do a lot of exercise, so I've always thought that was probably why. Either that, or I probably haven't gone deep enough yet. So who knows? But I've never ever gone really, really, really skinny. And so I'm obviously more like Sky's physique, whereas Joey went really, 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 really skinny. And if you want to see any photos, I've got pictures and like I say, I just had to allow him to have his process. Like I say, it was my weakness that was stopping his process, and eventually I did, like I say, and people would say he's too thin and all sorts of things, and I would just have to stay in my truth and totally trust. And now I'd actually, if you stand Joey and Sky together, you'd actually see Joey's coat is probably slightly better than Sky's. So anyway, so that's that. So you can celebrate big time, because you have made a massive, 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 massive move in the right direction for your pets. And I like I say, there is no turning back. So I'm looking at my time goes, and I really hope I've given you quality content here. But I'm going to talk about alternative foods before I go, definitely. So the alternative foods. For alternative days, and you basically rotate the feeding. So when I started this, Nora recommended cooked sweet potatoes, cooked squashes, cooked pumpkin, but anything that basically, when it cooks, it goes very sugary. When it's well cooked, it goes very sugary, and then it mimics more like fruit, like the fruit sugars. And her theory was that would process well, and it was mainly humouring pet owners who wanted to still prepare food for their pets, and often you can't necessarily sometimes it's a struggle to get the dogs to eat fruits. And I had that experience. Sky's always been a spaniel that eats everything and anything, so she wouldn't have ever had a problem. But Joey was more finicky, and I definitely remember having problems with him in the beginning to actually get him to eat fruits. He wasn't interested, but guess what? I was still feeding him, and I know now I was overfeeding him. So what you will find, if you do the initial process like I'm suggesting, where you have like 2 to 4 weeks on, if you're coming off of kibble, go for something like cooked veggies. If you can get them to eat fruits, that's better, no doubt about it. It's just better. It's natural. It's in its natural. You pick the fruits and you can cut them up, and they're as nature has provided. That's how a dog would eat them if it came across them out and in the wild, or a wolf would eat them out in the wild. That is what they would get. They would not get cooked sweet potatoes or cooked squashes out there. So I've always felt, and that's why I did the routine of the 1 meat day followed by the 48-hour rest, and then another meat, so that followed, and then by another meat meal. So I would have the 1 meat day, fast day, meat day, fast day, meat day, fast day, because I struggled, because when I did feed my dogs cooked sweet potatoes, and Nora at that point was also suggesting quinoa, which is actually a seed rather than a grain, and therefore obviously is a lot easier for the dog's system to think. And it was more to humour pet owners that wanted to cook food for them. But when I fed Joey and Sky, and again their digestion wasn't optimal in the beginning, literally the mashed up sweet potatoes would come out the other end like mashed up sweet potatoes. It didn't look like sausage sweet potatoes or anything. It looked just like it had gone in, it came out. And to me, that was a complete waste of time of their the whole digestive process. And I felt like I was burdening their system for a waste of time, in that it just came out the way it went in. So why would I put it in the same quantity as well? So it wasn't like some disappeared or anything. It literally, the amount that went in came out. And the other problem that I had with feeding that way was they were permanently wanting to pee. So it obviously hydrates quite a lot, but and permanently pooping everywhere. It was just orange mess coming out everywhere. So I didn't really warm to it. So I opted for meat days, fast days, meat days, fast days. But that's hard on you emotionally if you're regularly fasting your dogs like that. But that gave me amazing results with Sky. And in between those, I would also have longer fasts as well. Like if I was traveling, like I often go and stay with my mum for a few days, so there'd be 3 or 4 days where we'd be traveling. Well, I wasn't going to batch up a load of food. If they ever acted like they were starving, then I would obviously go to a supermarket and pick up some chicken legs if I was desperate. But I didn't. If I was traveling, we were out of our usual routine, so it was a really good opportunity for me to actually give them a longer fast, which would be like 3 or 4 days where they wouldn't. And it just made my life easy because I never ever had to worry about food feeding, fine feeding. And then obviously I would generally be, if I was staying in my mum's or staying in a hotel, it would be a lot easier because the dogs wouldn't have any food in them, so I wouldn't have to worry. I would always obviously take them out for peas, before we went to bed, but I wouldn't have any, in the middle of the night wake up calls that they needed to go out and go to the toilet. So so it just made my whole traveling experience a lot easier. Okay, so I'm going to go back because it's getting on for 7:30, and just touch on the alternative food. So fruits, and so cooked sweet potatoes, squashes, they are definitely optional. You've heard my experience with them. What I would say are optimal is fruits, and all fruits. There's the myth of the grapes, but mine love grapes. And grape, I don't know where that's come from, and unless it was like a badly fed kibble dog that got hold of a ton of grapes and overate grapes, then yeah, that would make them probably have bellyache. Or something more serious, if you got grapes on top of a load of kibble, yeah, you could get problems in the tummy with some sort of mix like that. So I don't know where that story came from, but my experience is all fruits, the dogs just love them. Watermelon, they love. Mangoes, they absolutely adore. Bananas are really good as a tool because when you're feeding fruits, they're obviously a lot lighter than meat, so the dogs can act hungry. And I've always used bananas because you can feed 2 or 3 bananas, and well, how many bananas you can eat. Bananas are pretty filling, and the dogs experience that as well. So if in this, and I did mention about optimal times for using so fruits are very cooling for the dogs. So in the summer, I will, if we have a heat wave, then I will only feed fruits. I will only feed fruits. And I promise you, we've had an extremely hot summer this year, and my dogs were not panting. My dogs were running around in the summer. That if they, I would always give them the option of being able to go out, but they would. There was no choice, but they were fed fruits. That's all I would feed in the summer, or on very hot stages. And then, like I say, I'd wait till the temperatures dropped or came back more to sort of a bit cooler, and then I'd give them a meat day. But they can go long periods. I would, yeah, they can definitely go long periods, 30 days on fruits. But then, you know, they, at the end of the day, they are a carnivore, a facultative carnivore, so they do need meat for optimal. So a meat meal thrown in the summer, no problem at all. And then in the winter, you can obviously do the opposite. Mine will shiver on fruit days. If I feed them fruit days in the winter, or if it's particularly cold, they'll be shivering and then sleeping in the night. So I'd end up having to put a coat on or something in the night time. So yeah, so you can actually use fruits as a tool, but they're also very, very good if you've got overweight dogs, sick dogs. The fruit is so much lighter on their systems. If you've got sick dogs, then, you know, a 14-day watermelon fast would be, you know, a first point. If you didn't want to actually fast your dogs, so, you know, if you weren't ready to fast your dog, then you could actually help it. Again, I wouldn't feed, I would make sure I'd had a 24-hour gap, and that the last meal that you'd fed had gone through your dog, because what you don't want is fruits going on top of your old food or other food. And that's the same with when you're feeding meat and fruits together. We only feed meat days, fruit days, fasting days, and that's to allow the digestive process to do its course. So the optimal is a meat day followed by a fast day, followed by a fruit day. That, you know, that's a really good routine. And you can have followed by fruit day. So, and you could then have meat day, fast day, fruit day. So 2 fruit days, then have another meat day, and then have another fasting day, and then bring the fruits back in, because the fasting allows the meat that time to process, which obviously is a lot quicker. So that's, you know, and then, like I say, if you've got a sick pet, that would be what I'd be, and you didn't want to fast, I would generally start with that magic 48-hour fast, whatever I was doing, and then introduce a new type of food. But yeah, so that's that. So it's now just after 7:30, so I'm going to wind it up. I'll bring up some more of these topics, because they're, you know, I've got some really good topics to share with you, but I think you've probably had enough for today. So yeah, so that's that. Tomorrow my plan is to do more of a Q&A session. So if you've got, my email address is karen@dogsdiscovery.co.uk. My apologies that you haven't received your replays yet. You may have just received them. We were playing around with them this afternoon, and trying to get them over to you. But the replays from yesterday, you'll hopefully have now. If not, very, very soon. We're definitely on it. And then tomorrow, like I say, my plan is to do a Q&A. Karen@dogsdiscovery.co.uk. If you could email any questions that you've got from either today or yesterday, or just anything else that's playing in your mind, then I will address that in the talk tomorrow, with a lot of the content I haven't covered today. So okay, so wind up. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for staying right the way till the end. And yeah, we'll see you again tomorrow, and we'll have the replays on the way to you. Thank you so much. And yeah, lovely to see you. See you soon. Bye.